Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome back to another StarCraft video. Now today we are gonna go over the most recently announced balance changes to StarCraft 2. I'm gonna be showing you some gameplay, I'm gonna try and give you my thoughts, and we're gonna discuss what Blizzard has been working on. Now, just to note, these changes are set to go live after BlizzCon wraps up. So I'm assuming in like, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks or so from now is when we will actually see these changes in the live version of StarCraft 2. And obviously, these changes are in addition to the previous videos that are already made about the patch notes that Blizzard has been putting out. So if you missed those videos, I'll go ahead and link them down below the like button in the description of this video. Now you can already see the units right here that are most affected. We have the Carrier, the Cyclone, and once again, the good old Hydralisk. We hope you had fun watching the GSL Super Tournament event. We certainly did. The matches were really exciting, and we're that much closer to crowning a champion at the global finals at BlizzCon. That said, all the excitement hasn't stopped us from paying attention to community feedback on the balance test map. We're already planning to make some additional changes. Let us dig in. Now, some of these changes really are substantial. All right. So here we have the Cyclone. Now, they've been messing around with the Cyclone quite a bit. The Cyclone unit has changed back to the 3.8 version. So just to clarify, we are currently in patch like 4.x, right? That is what we have been playing since like November last year. This is basically gonna revert the Cyclone back to like the 2016 or so edition of the unit. It's quite interesting. It now requires a tech lab to be built at the factory, health has been decreased, movement speed has been increased, supply cost has also been increased, and the unit armor has been set to 1. The Tornado Blaster weapon changed to the Typhoon Missile Pod weapon. I wonder how they come up with these names sometimes. The damage has been changed from 3 to 18. You read that right. You can target air and ground units. The attack rate has changed quite substantially as well. It is much slower. Rather than like a machine gun, you know, it's gonna be more like a cannon. The range has been decreased from 6 to 5. The weapon upgrades changed from +1 to +2 to account for new damage value. Lock-on ability has changed. The ability can auto-cast, which is quite interesting. Can now target ground and flying units and structures. Damage changed from 160 to 400 damage over 14 seconds. Rapid fire launcher upgrade removed. Added the mag field accelerator upgrade. Basically what it all comes down to is that the Cyclone as we know it is basically gone, and we have a unit that looks the exact same. It's got the exact same name, but it plays completely differently. We're gonna jump in game in just a second. Let's read their reasoning first off. When Legacy of the Void first launched, the Cyclone was quite different, requiring a tech lab sporting lower durability and having the ability to lock onto both air and ground targets. The Cyclone acted as an assassination tool. It could pick a target and destroy it, assuming the player gave enough micro attention to keep it moving and out of harm's way. These Cyclones were intended to pick off high-tech or tanky units from other races to give Terran more early to mid-game control, and the upgrade allowed it to scale better into the late game. In patch 3.8, we changed the Cyclone into a frontline unit that could provide early game firepower. While the meta has shifted back and forth since then, the frontline Cyclone did its job well. But there are some concerns that the early game Terran strategies, especially for proxies, have become almost too varied for opponents to handle. Just have a look at Eddie of Maru's games, in particular against Protoss. At the same time, there is still room to give Terrans a way to trade against opponents in the mid and late game without going all in. Additionally, just before patch 3.8 came out, we started seeing more innovative uses of the Cyclone in pro-level matches. For these reasons, we want to experiment with reinstating the pre-3.8 Cyclone. I think it is critical that we jump into the game. I set up a bit of a Terran base over here. I made myself a couple of factories, and I also have a command center that's gonna be essentially our our target to kill. Let us get started by sending this SUV back, but also by producing a bunch of tech labs. As you may have already noticed, well, let me cancel just one of them. I can no longer build the Cyclone without a tech lab. which already is just a fundamental change on its own. Now, the thing about Cyclones is that they are a rather interesting unit. We have been seeing a particular innovation, use them every once in a while near like the late game of any of the Terran matchups when he's playing mech, but it's always been more or less like a specialty unit, or a unit that gets proxied and absolutely destroys everything, or a unit that gets made as like a general purpose, all-round defensive kind of thing. Now, the change to this unit is gonna make it a much more microable unit, and I personally think that's something that Terran mech kind of misses, you know? Like, Bio-Terran, when you play that Marine Marauder Medivac-based army, you can micro it basically with a insane skill ceiling. You can never really reach the maximum potential. With mech, however, I mean, you can make a couple of, I guess, like, Banshees, and you can make a couple of, I don't know, like, Hellions and stuff, but usually you're much more passive. So I kind of like the idea of giving Cyclone something to micro, or giving Terran mech rather something to micro in the Cyclone. I don't mind that idea at all. You can see already, though, they are much faster. It's gonna be very interesting to see how they're gonna, like, play out with Hellions. But this is definitely one of those units that I'm gonna have to, you know, try out substantially before I can properly give you my thoughts. Can I lock onto my own structures? I think that might be a little bit difficult, right? It did specifically say you might be able to lock on, but obviously these are friendly structures, so it might just be a little difficult anyway. Anyway, I think what we're gonna do is attack this command center with the units that we've got. Now notice, or rather before we do so, keep in mind their damage is significantly higher, but their attack speed has also been nerfed. Their movement speed is higher, but their HP has also been nerfed. So it's really a completely different unit. Look at that. You, stop sleeping on the job, buddy. It's so different, right? It's like the Terran engineers have been sleeping on the job and they don't really know exactly what to do about this. The movement speed is substantial, so they're definitely still going to be able to mix and mingle with Terran Hellions just fine. But since you need, of course, that tech lab to produce anything, it might not be as common. Now, we do also still have this one. Increases the Cyclone lock-on damage, deals 400 damage, plus 400 versus armored, over 14 seconds to ground targets, and 400 to 400 versus armored, once again, over 14 seconds to flying targets. Long story short, right, it says that it deals like 800 damage to targets that are armored. The thing is, it does so over 14 seconds, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, 14 seconds in StarCraft terms is really, really long. I'm really curious how this is gonna play out. Now, I'm a little worried that it might just once again turn into one of those units you kind of just produce until you start making siege tanks, which is something we have seen in the past where you kind of maybe want to get yourself like one or so Cyclone, but, you know, that's something we will just have to figure out. What this will do, at the very least, is nerf my personal Terran versus Terran win rate. I got a really sick TVT win rate by just making a bunch of Cyclones. I don't think that's really going to be viable anymore. And I think the last thing to note about this as well is that the Cyclone is going to be, I don't think, so good in proxies anymore, because one of the reasons why, for example, Maru gets away with proxying Cyclones and proxying factories is because you can produce 2 at once in the early game. Obviously, giving it the requirement of a tech lab is going to substantially lower the all-in potential. And obviously, that maybe is somewhat of a nerf to Terran, but I think for the most part, we can all agree that Terran has more than enough variety when it comes to the different all-ins anyway. Now, I'm curious, do we still get our... Yeah, we still do. I was gonna say, do we still get our red LEDs? As we all know, just like with computers, if you add LEDs to your units, they move faster and, you know, attack quicker and all that. I'm curious to see how this is gonna play out, though. This is one of those units I'm definitely gonna have to test substantially before I can really give you my proper judgment. And then besides the Cyclone change, there's also a nice improvement to the Battlecruiser. Battlecruisers will no longer switch attack targets while moving unless ordered to do so or the current target leaves its range. Previously, the Battlecruiser would continuously reevaluate threats while moving, often switching targets. Our aim is to give more control to the player, so Battlecruisers will now consistently remember their targets while moving. AI is coming for us, guys. They can now remember what to attack. No, not what we want. Anyways, obviously this is a good thing, right? Just simply giving mech more micro ability is a good thing, in my opinion. In fights where you might just, you know, clash and, you know, you can just attack move and nothing really happens. You know, you can't really control your units very cleanly. I personally am not a big fan of those. I like it much better when, even with a smaller army, you might still be able to win against a bigger army if you micro more efficiently than your opponent, right? And that's pretty much exactly what we have right here. Mech is definitely one of the unit compositions in StarCraft when you focus around siege tanks, Thors, Hellbats, Hellions, where most of the time you just max out in an attack move. Right? And that's kind of your micro, just knowing when to attack. I like the fact that the Cyclone, one of the units that might very well be a core unit, it's hard to say right now, but one of the units is going to be much better at like assassinating little targets, and then obviously the battlecruiser can also be microed more efficiently. I think that's where we want mech to be headed. I think it's a good thing. Alrighty guys. Next change, to the Zerg. We have only one change, and it's once more to the Hydralisk. Hydralisk attack speed changed from 0.57 to 0.59, so that is a slight attack speed reduction. In the last test balance update, we changed the Hydralisk attack speed from 0.54 to 0.57, instead of reducing its health by 5 HP. I mentioned that I really like that change. It's nerfing the Hydralisk, making it so that big clumps are not as powerful, but it's still gonna give you, a chance to maybe get out of Storm. We still like the direction of this change, but we agree with feedback that we need to go a bit further, because this change approaches what 5 HP nerfs would do. Thus, we will be reverting the Hydralisk attack speed back to its Harder to Swarm value of 0.59. This is primarily to address Zerg versus Protoss, I think, and to a lesser extent, Zerg versus Terran as well. Hydralink Bane is just simply the go-to composition in both matchups, more so against Protoss, or at least like more of a Hydra focused against Protoss, just because Hydras kind of are the jack of all trades. And as I mentioned 1,000 times, I do not like units that are a jack of all trades. I like it much better when you need a composition of units in order to be efficient. So I don't mind this. It might make it a little bit more difficult to, for example, do a Hydralisk timing attacks. And already we saw a nerf to that when the Hydra upgrades once again got split about a half year or so ago, right? So I think Hydra attacks are still going to be doable, but at the very least at the pro level, I don't think timing attacks are really going to be viable anymore, just with all the little things adding up together. Hydras are still going to definitely be a core staple, but I don't think you necessarily want to sit on them for too long, and you might have to just transition to either Lurkers or maybe Hive Tech with Brute Lords and whatnot, maybe even Mutalisk, right? They're going to be interesting once again, but just a little bit quicker. Alrighty, here we have a change to the Dark Shrine. Now remember when Blizzard gave Protoss players rather the ability to blink their Dark Templar, and I said right from the get-go, no one's gonna use this. It's awful, no one's ever gonna play with it very much. Whereas on the Battle.net forums, I went there on the live stream and I played some sentimental music. I saw a lot of people being very upset that Dark Templar gained blink, and on paper it sounds obviously very broken, but in the grand scheme of things, since Shadow Strike's research is like 2 minutes, and since Dark Templar timing attacks kind of like require you to hit as early as possible, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to get Blink, because by the time you get Blink, it's like 2 minutes later into the game, and players are just simply going to be able to counter you blindly. So in the grand scheme of things, we have seen the Dark Templar bring Blink every once in a while, but it's probably one of the least exciting upgrades in the game. I would like to see a little bit more use for it, so apparently the Shadow Strike research time has been reduced from 121 to 100, and the Shadow Strike cooldown reduced from 21 to 14. So the prospect of Blink Dark Templar when they were first introduced was a frightening nightmare for some, but we haven't seen them used much lately. We'd like to try adjustments to both research time and cooldown, and then reevaluate the results. So I think that's a good change. Once again, upgrades that are underutilized in StarCraft should be buffed or changed or removed or something along those lines, and I think that the line of thought right here makes a lot of sense. Just giving Dark Templar Blink by default would be utterly broken, but buffing the amount of time that it takes to research it, I think makes a lot of sense, and then reducing the cooldown of it as well just, makes it maybe a little bit more viable. I don't think it's going to be very common still, but it's maybe going to make it a little bit more viable, maybe in like late game Protoss scenarios where you've got the money to just simply research Shadow Strike as well. Alrighty, so we saw a fundamental change to the Cyclone. Here is another very important one. Once again, we are messing around with the carrier. Now this is on top of all of the existing changes to the carrier already. I will show you what the unit looks like in game in just a second. But the carrier interceptor damage changed from 8 times 1 to 5 times 2. Interceptors will get +1 times 2 per air attack upgrade instead of +1 times 1. And interceptor release periods changed from 0.36 to 0.27. The first two changes right here matter mostly when it comes to upgrades. In particular, the armor of the unit that's being attacked is going to become a lot more important. And the interceptor release period change will make it so that the interceptors will be able to release a little bit faster, which kind of makes sense with the removal of the graviton catapult change. So we've gotten feedback that carriers are a bit weaker than our ideal target power level. Thus, we'd like to make a few changes that will bring them closer to their previous damage output. In addition to their damage values being reverted, we'd like to decrease interceptor release periods so they launch at a rate between the pre and post graviton catapult upgrade rates. I think we have to judge this by jumping into the game. I can't really tell you what it's like by just reading this. Alrighty, so I set up a bit of a Protoss base right here. I made a couple of additional pylons. I got myself 6 stargates. And I think it is time for us to start producing a bunch of those carriers. Now, I compiled all of the changes that Blizzard has made to the carrier right here. So, Graviton Catapult upgrade has been removed. Hit points and shield increased from 250, 150 to 300, 150. Build time decreased from 86 to 64 seconds. Interceptor build time increased from 6 to 11 seconds. And then the interceptor release period changed from 0.36 to 0.27. So, all things considered, right? Just like with the Cyclone, the unit is very different than it once was. I think one of the most critical changes about this unit is actually the fact that it builds quite a bit faster. And I personally, I'm a little conflicted with this. So hear me out, right? One of the reasons why Zerg players and Terran players kind of try and play really aggressive in the mid game against Protoss is because beating Protoss when they are maxed out with like Storm and a Mothership and 20 carriers and all that is extremely difficult. I personally am also a little bit conflicted with the sense that when Protoss manages to get up to that max army composition, usually this is what it feels like when you play against it. It feels like Protoss just grabs all their stuff and then attack moves across the map. And when I play a lot of Protoss myself as well, and I play that super laid-back style, I have to be honest, it kind of feels like that sometimes too. You mostly just attack move. So I think it's a combination of the fact that people are frustrated playing against it because it's very hard to kill, but also the fact that carriers are kind of this jack-of-all-trades unit that doesn't really seem to, you know, lose very quickly, and it doesn't really die very easily, and it kind of just kills everything while not really microing, right? So I kind of would like it for carriers to become something a little bit more microable as well, maybe something that is, you know, requiring just a little bit more skill to properly use. Anyway, that is something that I just fundamentally feel about the carrier. Now, they are more tanky than they once were, right? So they gained 50 HP. Their build time has been decreased. Interceptor build time, however, has been increased by like almost twofold. And the interceptor release period has changed. However, the graviton catapult upgrade has been removed. So there used to be an upgrade right here in the fleet beacon that allowed you to deploy all of your interceptors at once. That is now gone. So they're still going to deploy them, but not as fast as they once did. But now, after this new patch, once again, a little bit faster. So let us have a look, okay? I'm just going to use one carrier right here to attack one pylon. And you can see that they still come out rather quickly. Right? I was actually quite surprised when I realized how quickly they actually still come out. I mean, they don't come out immediately. It's not like you deploy 8 of them at once. But there is no denying that if you have got, like, you know, I don't know, like 6 carriers, it's gonna be difficult to kill all of those, right? You see how quickly that went? And then with the fact that they come out faster and the fact that they have more HP, it makes me a little worried that they are just simply gonna be, once again, like the old carrier where Protoss have the option of just simply sitting back for 20 minutes, max out on carriers, and win the game. Now, there's no denying that this is more or less an issue, I think, probably between like High Master, maybe Low Grandmaster, and like Bronze League. You know, like the very bottom to like the top 500 world or so. I think this is not really going to be much of an issue at the professional level of play whatsoever, because the pro gamers are extremely good at countering these kinds of units, and they are very good at playing that slowly progressing methodical play style. I just feel like this is something that a lot of people are going to be struggling against quite a bit when just simply playing on the ladder, and I'm not entirely sure if I like that idea all too much. So the unit definitely is once again going to require a lot of testing to see whether or not it's actually better. I will definitely agree with the fact that carriers, after I tested them substantially in the balanced test map already, kind of felt bad. You made them, and while they were very tanky and they could soak up a lot of damage, and they did come out quite early, their damage output wasn't very substantial, and you kind of needed them to be supported by a lot of other units. They kind of felt like a flying tank in a way, you know? Like, they've got a lot of HP. That's 450 hit points. That's substantial. Plus the 80 HP of every interceptor, right? Interceptors have 40 shields, 40 HP. That's more than a Marine. With 8 interceptors, obviously, you got 640 HP or hit points right there, and then 450. You got a lot, like, it kind of feels like an air tank, right? So I personally didn't really mind it too much. I kind of felt like it may be a little too weak, but I think all of these changes combined, it might just make it too powerful once more. Although once more, right, that's going to require a lot of testing. It just kind of is my gut feeling that we may very well go back to carriers just being that maxed out unit that is very difficult to kill. And once more, I don't think it's really going to affect the pro level play very much, but it is definitely going to affect pretty much everyone that plays on the ladder. Like all millions of people that play on the ladder every month. You know, they're going to definitely, in particular if you play like 4v4, you know, you're going to have that one ally as well that's just simply sitting in the corner making carriers, doing nothing. And then he's complaining when everyone else loses. I don't know, I'm feeling a little conflicted about the unit, and I'm not sure if I really like the direction that it is necessarily headed to. Alright, then there's one more change right here to the warp gate, and I actually don't really know exactly how this one plays out. So, gateways transformed to warp gate will now be an auto-cast ability. So what it's like currently on the balanced test map, or at the very least in the previous version that I played a lot, is that after you research the warp gate upgrade, all gateways you build after that are gonna be automatically changed to warp gates. Right? So previous iterations of the automated warp gate change caused a bit of a confusion, as some gateways would automatically transform to warp gates while others wouldn't. So the ones that were built pre the research finishing would not change, but the ones that were built after that would. I think this means that all gateways will automatically change right when the warp gate upgrade has finished up. So we'd like to re-implement this change as an auto-cast ability. Well, let's just jump back into the game so we can figure it out. All right, so first things first, let's put down a bunch of gateways. Can I make a line of gateways over here? Because I'm assuming... Oh my god, that last one is misplaced. I'm assuming this means that every single time you finish up one of those gateways... After... Well, we know already, right? That they changed to warp gates right after the upgrade finished. I'm assuming that this is gonna make it so that the warp gates that are already done by the time the warp gate upgrade finishes are also gonna auto-change. It's a nice quality of life improvement. I know I like to use that word a lot. Some people don't like it when some of these relatively boring things get automated. I personally don't really mind it, to be honest. There's no denying that sometimes it can be difficult while you're like microing your warp prism and all kinds of other tricky things to also switch your gateways back to warp gates. Nah, I'm not, you know, it's not gonna affect pro level play very much. I mean, pro gamers are not gonna accidentally forget morphing in their gateways, right? But I kind of wish there was a change to go back from a warp gate into a gateway. Like maybe make it so that players switch from, you know, attacking from like warp gates to gateways. You know, I wish you could switch back when you're like playing defensively to like a regular gateway. Anyways, the upgrade is just about to finish. So I'm assuming all of my gateways are gonna auto change to warp gates, I think. I mean, it's almost done. Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. All right. Now, the funny part is that you still do have the option to change back into a gateway. I wish there was a reason for this. How cool would it be, right? Maybe that's just me being crazy. But how cool would it be if you could, like, play offensively with warp gates and defensively with gateways? So say you want to switch to a defensive stance instead. You can just produce out of gateways, just like you did in StarCraft 1. You can start morphing them back into gateways, and then maybe the unit produces like 20% faster or something. That'd be pretty cool, right? I think it would be pretty interesting. But I've been saying that for years, and nobody really seems to agree with me on that one. But I think it would be cool for there to be a reason to switch your gateways back into or your warp gates, rather, once again, back into gateways. I wouldn't mind that whatsoever. And I think that is pretty much it. Alrighty. Now, there's a couple more things I want to note. As always, we'd like to reiterate that these changes are not final, and we'll be actively looking at your feedback. Some specific concerns that we are continuing to look into include Terran versus Zerg in the strength of Mutalisk against both Bio and Mech. Wait, are they saying that Mutalisk are too strong or too weak? Because the fact of the matter is, the way it's written, right? Terran versus Zerg in the strength of Mutalisk against... I kind of feel like Mutas are kind of weak. Am I crazy? They are finally seeing a little bit of play once again, but they're still very easy to counter for Terran, with both Bio as well as Mech. Now, obviously, the changes to like the Thor armor and all that, and maybe the Cyclone change is going to make it difficult to play against Mutas when you're playing Mech, but, I mean... yeah, alright. I don't think this is very much of an issue right now, and that's something that people will probably find out over the course of time. TVP early game with the strength of proxies. This is a big one. If you've been watching StarCraft 2 at the pro level, in particular Maru, probably the greatest StarCraft 2 player right now, and throughout 2018, definitely one of the strongest players together with Serral. Anyways, Maru has been doing a stupid amount of proxy play. Like, he's been winning, like, hundreds of thousands, feels like, proxying in particular against Protoss. And I think the Cyclone change will probably already, at the very least, reflect some of that. But, yeah, there's no denying that maybe they're just a little bit too strong. That might also just have to do with the early game defense mechanisms of Protoss, though. Obviously, Protoss... Whenever the, or when the mothership core got removed, right, they kind of lost a lot of that potential in the early game, and shield batteries are decent, but obviously they can't be used offensively when you just build them at home, so it's an interesting situation. It might also have to do with, like, early game scouting that Protoss has, just because you kind of have to just get lucky and stumble across the proxy of Terran. It's a difficult thing to judge. And last but not least, we have the Zerg versus Protoss mid-game and the openers and compositions leading up to it. Zerg versus Protoss mid-game and the openers and compositions leading up to it. So I think there's actually a lot of variety in Zerg versus Protoss mid-game when you play Zerg, right? You can play Ling Bane, you can play Roaches, you can go into Hydras, you can switch into Lurkers, or you can go to Hydra Ling Bane, or you can go into a faster Hive tech. I guess there's no denying, though, that Zerg versus Protoss mid-game is all about Hydra Ling and, you know, Hydra Ling Bane and maybe Hydra Lurker. But I personally don't really see much of an issue with that. I mean, that's very similar to all of the other matchups in StarCraft, you know, where you really only have one or two go-to unit compositions with some specialty units being added. Like, for example, the Mutalisk. I would love the Muta to become more prevalent in Zerg versus Protoss as well, but if they plan on to, or if they are planning to nerf the Muta because of Terran versus Zerg, which I would be very surprised by, to be honest. Yeah, that's gonna make that, it's gonna make, like, these two don't really work very well together. You see my point? I think Mutas would be cool to have as a mid-game unit against Protoss, but as it is right now, they are already kind of difficult to use. And, I mean, other mid-game units, I guess, could include, like, Infestors. I wouldn't mind Infestors whatsoever, they're just so difficult to properly use, although with the most recent changes in the previous patch notes, the Infestor has become a lot more viable just because the unit is smaller and it's less stupid and it doesn't, like, bump into things as quickly. It's cool, man. There's a lot of things that are being changed. Now, the only thing that I'm a little bit worried about, and I've been talking about this quite a lot over at the live stream. For those of you, by the way, unfamiliar, I stream Monday through Saturday, 2 to 8 p.m. CEST. Links are down below. It's twitch.tv/LowkoTV. But, the one thing that I'm a little concerned about is the amount of people that actually play the balanced test map. Because I've been playing the balanced test map a lot. But sometimes I queue up for like 10-15 minutes and then I find someone in like Gold League or something. And I don't mean to sound, you know, I don't mean to sound rude, but I think I should be able to win against most people in like Silver and Gold League, you know? There's not a lot of people that are currently playing the balanced test map. Yeah, I've been trying to find a lot of games in it, but I haven't found a lot of them. And I think also, since the game is balanced at the pro level, right? People are trying to balance the game at the top of the line, at the professional level of play. And the fact that a lot of pro gamers are not playing this test map because they are obviously not getting paid to do so. They get paid to play the actual regular version of the game. It's difficult to say if like these patches are already ready to go live by the end of next month. I've got a feeling that if they plan on releasing it right after BlizzCon, then it might just be a little bit too quick. Now, obviously, usually the end of the year, so I would say in particular December and usually also January, there aren't a lot of tournaments in StarCraft. Excuse me. Just because the competitive season kind of starts up again like February or so. So there is some downtime there, but the thing is a lot of pro gamers then also take some time off, you know? Around Christmas time, no one's really going to be playing. So I'm curious to see how this is going to go. I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. I am really excited for it, though. I'm a big fan of the majority of the changes. I think the game is headed in the right direction. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I'm glad that the Balance team is addressing some of the core issues in the game while not really touching a lot of the fundamentals, so to say. I really, really like this. Like, for example, bringing up units that are underutilized, like, for example, the Battlecruiser, and addressing units that may be just a little bit too strong, like, for example, the Carrier and the Hydralisk, and just simply making it so that the game is better in the long run. I'm just curious what the balance is going to look like in, like, 3 months from now. Because I've got a feeling people are going to find some very, very broken strategies, and I hope the Balance team is ready for that. But for now, let me know what your thoughts are on these changes down below in the comments section of the video. A special shout out to the Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for helping me out directly. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? Don't forget, okay? And I'll see you once again in the next one.